Hello and welcome to Perspectives, where we take a deep dive into the issues of the day and where we take a look at people's opinion on such issues. I am Ruth Osime.
And I am Olatorera Majekodunmi-Oniru, here today for another important episode of Perspectives. Today's topic is rape. We have very important facts and special guests coming up, so please stay tuned.
Welcome back to Perspectives here on Arise News. Rape remains a controversial issue, with a few victims reporting experience because of the myriad of societal perception, prolonged steps in pursuing a case to logical conclusion of securing conviction, as well as psychological and physical residuals of the experience. In 2015, UNICEF reported that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 10 boys in Nigeria has experienced sexual violence before the age of 18. The person most affected by rape or sexual violence is the victim/survivor, and the effects of this abuse goes far more than their survival, as a wide range of reactions can impact victims. Whether an assault was completed or attempted, and regardless of whether it happened recently or many years ago, it may impact daily functioning. Rape is punishable by a minimum of 12 years in prison without the possibility of a fine and a maximum of life in prison. If the perpetrator is under the age of 14, the maximum penalty is 14 years in prison. And if the rape is committed in a group or a gang, all perpetrators face a minimum of 20 years in prison. The number of rape cases reported around the country has risen alarmingly. In Nigeria, hundreds of rape cases are reported annually, but for fear of being stigmatized and blamed, many victims absorb the pain of the crime committed against them, leaving their assailants free to commit future atrocities. Though the law spells out the penalty for proving rape cases, delays in getting justice has forced many victims to abandon the pursuit of justice due to financial constraints. Law enforcement agents must show empathy to rape victims and must not be judgmental by seeing the victims as a cost of what happened to them. In addition to punishment, every person convicted of rape should also be made to pay compensation to the victim. Also, most importantly, simply letting a survivor know that you believe them and that you stand behind them is meaningful.
Absolutely. Sex should always be consensual, and the basis of sex should most ideally be love. Pure, mutual, respectful, and genuine love will never instigate rape. Every human body is sacred, and internal organs are supernaturally made to do certain things. Forcefully invading another human being's body can be detrimental to the soul of the raped. This is especially worrisome with children. Every human being should be old enough to decide when, where, and if they desire to be sexually active. An old man having intercourse with his underage wife is rape. Similarly, a female caretaker copulating with an underage boy is rape. Perpetrators of rape are 99% men. Therefore, we need to critically understand why men rape. Certain rapists have confessed to using rape as a tool to calm their anger and frustration induced by power-drunk or power-hungry testosterone moments of lustfulness. Certain rapists derive power, control, and sexual pleasure from seeing their victims in pain. And they are the antisocial ones who rape because they are insecure in their abilities to attract a woman and cannot handle rejection. Many rapists have also been poorly raised and poorly educated about women and sex. Many are emotionally detached and have been emotionally damaged. It is highly important to raise men to understand the dehumanizing, devastating, toxic, and highly detrimental impact of rape. Rape in itself, PTSD, STDs, and unwanted pregnancies are evil. Rape is a complete and total no-no. 90% of rape victims are deeply traumatized, and about 40% contemplate suicide, while many go on to use drugs such as cocaine and marijuana. In a functional society with good governance, rapists should be reported, and convicted rapists should be rehabilitated with proper education and emotional therapy. Rapists that are unable to change should then be incarcerated and prevented from harming future victims. A significant increase in communal love and high-quality education will yield a notable decrease in rape. We need to raise children with progressive cultural norms and the notion of socialized gender equality. Let's watch this special report. We will be right back.
The issue of rape is one that has been a concern for years, as cases are constantly reported globally. Rape is an unlawful act that typically involves sexual intercourse carried out forcibly or under threat of injury against a person's will. It is a global problem. Accurate statistics regarding rape are notoriously difficult to obtain. The biggest complication is that most victims of sexual violence choose not to report it, and there are many possible reasons for this decision. One could be embarrassment, victim shaming, fear of reprisal from the rapist, or even fear of how the victim's own family will react. Whatever the reason for a victim's silence, the effect is that rape goes grossly underreported in many countries. It is estimated that approximately 35% of women worldwide have experienced sexual harassment in their lifetime. So today on Perspectives, we will be taking a look at the stigma attached to rape, lack of effect from the judicial system, the blame game on the victims, and the need for victims to speak out.
Okay.
Deep topic.
It's a very deep topic, and it's you know, I really feel that women that come out to be able to tell their story are very brave.
Very strong.
And I think that they should be seen and respected for what they have done, for their courage that they have taken to be able to come out and tell their story.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of women today, if you look at their background or find out what it is that is wrong with them, if they have issues, there's an underlying factor, and sometimes this factor is because of rape. It affects their relationship with other people, it affects their ability to trust people again. And what I find most painful is that the system, or our legal system, or our police system, don't seem to attach as much importance as should be attached to the case of rape. I think if stringent laws are taken and followed, maybe that will curb this menace in our system.
What I find most bewildering is the fact that there are just certain men that want to suppress women. They see women as that tool that can be controlled. And especially the power-drunk ones, when we remember the cases of R. Kelly and Bill Cosby.
No, R. Kelly had issues. He was sick.
Yeah, there are many of them like that.
There are many like that. But
and they want to suppress women. Like, they derive joy in seeing women in pain and torturing them. And I mean, what women have gone through under rape situations is just toxic.
I know it's toxic, but I'm even more worried by the ones that look conventional, that you would never believe that this can happen.
The men or the women?
No, the men that look conventional. R. Kelly's own, I mean, it became such a habit, and it was sad, and you know, a lot of people were heartbroken because he represented a figure in society of a black man who had made a success of his career.
Because who
even played the role of a father.
He played that role so well.
He played the role of a father. He was an icon and everything. And even he never really admitted. That's the thing. It's worse when you actually feel some sense of remorse. But the likes of Bill Cosby and R. Kelly felt victimized, quote unquote, and thought it was all the women against them.
Oh wow!
You know, and that ability not to agree that you penetrated into a woman against her wish. And then there's some compromising situations where maybe you went out on a date and then he now feels, well, he's taking you out, he's treated you well, you have to, you know, pay him back, so to speak.
Yes,
and then when you now say no, that in itself is a problem. But our policemen, or you know, should begin to understand that when a woman says no, she means no, regardless of how compromising the situation is. Because they look at the situation, and based on that is when they now make their judgment. And it never favors the woman.
But there are some that now say, Oh, sometimes some women, when they say yes, when they say no, they actually mean
yes.
yes.
Exactly.
And they
What
end
does
up
that mean?
enjoying it. And it's like, no, her no is her no.
Her no is a no.
If she
Her
has
no is
said
a
no,
no.
she stop.
And it just...
If she really wants it, she'll say yes eventually.
Yeah, it even gets more difficult to defend when the situation is even more compromising. Were you in his house? At what time were you in his house? I mean, they crack jokes about you went to his house,
why did you
wore
enter
his
the
t-shirt,
room?
you are in the bed, and then you now say, and I really need to advise women that do not put yourself in a situation where you are already compromised physically. You know, in a system that is so judgmental, to even begin to defend yourself under that kind of condition, it's even worse.
But there's that question that, should men actually get consent prior to...
Well, a woman's body language should give you consent.
Do they need that verbal consent?
Maybe it's not necessarily verbal. It's not as if when you want to make love, now say, oh, hello, hang on, can I, you know, the body language, the chemistry between you should know whether it's a consensual sexual union or not.
And if she says no,
well, if she says no at that point in time, it just makes her case more dicey. But if she does say no at that point in time, you have to respect it.
You have to respect it.
Do you understand? You have to respect it, especially if she's struggling.
What about the women that can't say no? The underage women, the boys.
No, but that is already rape.
No,
that is already rape.
That are raping, exactly.
That is already rape. That's not even a matter of consent. That's already rape.
Exactly.
Even if you sleep with a 12-year-old child or a 14-year-old child, and she's quote unquote consent, she's not old enough to make that decision. So it's still rape.
Exactly. We can't defend those at all.
And then we cannot also ignore the fact that young boys who are being raped.
They are.
At the motor park, I've heard of stories where at the motor park, you know, when they are at the mercy of these men, they are also raped.
By men.
So we shouldn't just think it's just only women that are victims. It's just that 90% are women, but there are also the boys who are also raped, being raped as well.
They are.
Anyway, we are heading for a short break, but stay with us, because when we come back, we shall be ushering in our guest, human rights activist and public interest lawyer, Inibehe Effiong. Perspectives will return in just a moment. Moving on to our distinguished guest now. Inibehe Effiong is principal counsel at Inibehe Effiong Law Chambers, a human rights and public interest lawyer who has been involved in a lot of litigation practice since graduation from Nigerian law school. He describes himself as an enemy of oppressors who is committed to ending corruption and injustice in Nigeria. Inibehe Effiong is a board member of an African Chamber of Media and Information Literacy. For more than 3 years, Inibehe Effiong has been National Legal Advisor of African Action Congress political party.
That's right. At some point in his time at Nigerian Law School, he was president of the Students' Representatives Council. As a human rights activist, our guest, Inibehe Effiong, has never pulled the punches in standing up to the authorities in his passionate defense of human rights and due process. A case in point being his recent committal to prison for 1 month by the Chief Judge of Akwa Ibom State for raising fundamental questions of the due processes in court. We are simply grateful to have you on here for joining us on Perspectives. Inibehe, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Inibehe.
It's my pleasure to join you this morning.
Yes, I jumped the gun as usual by already telling you what role you're going to play.
Thank you.
Because you're going to have to be able to answer it from all angles.
Thank you.
So you are our guest today, you are the hot seats.
Thank you.
So let's even first start. When you are raped as a victim, what are the prerequisite steps that you need to do before you even report it to the police? What must you not do?
Well, when rape is committed, it is recommended that the victim should summon courage to lodge a complaint. I would recommend, depending on the severity of the act, depending on the circumstance, because we have to assess these cases on individual basis. Let's assume that the act, the crime, is so grave and nefarious that injury is sustained, there is bleeding, the victim may want to immediately seek medical attention before even having the strength to go to the police. That is just commonsensical. But it is also imperative that the police should be immediately alerted so that the investigative process can run pari passu with the medical treatment.
I agree.
I would recommend, and this is a matter, you know, that the jurisprudence and of course the medical doctors have also had cause to recommend that when rape is committed, it is recommended that the victim should first go to the hospital, as I said, without having to have birth. The belief is that, or the philosophy behind that is for preservation of evidence. Exactly. I wouldn't even recommend a rape victim to enter the bedroom and then want to have a birth. It is important to possibly go to the police in that state. Why? For preservation of evidence. Yes. The police may have to look at the state in which you came. Was your cloth torn? Are there blood stains on you? Or traces of semen, yes, either in your body or in your vagina? These things would be better preserved if the victim goes to make a complaint or goes to see a doctor. Immediately the offense is committed. Okay.
What's the legal age for consent, sexual consent in Nigeria?
Well, again, it depends on the jurisdiction. By that I mean the part of the country. And of course the applicable law. Under the Child Rights Act, which has been domesticated in several states. But of course, that domestication regarding age of consent differs. In Lagos, for example, under the Child Rights Law, and indeed most of the southern states, the age of consent is 18 regarding rape. Okay. But of course, in the north, for example, if you look at their definition of rape, if you look at what amounts to rape in the north, under section 282 of the Penal Code, it is basically a child that is less than 14. But in the south,
14
years, yes.
Why is that?
You are saying
under the Penal Code.
No, apart from even the rape, at the age of 14, you can have sex, is what you're saying? If you're from the north, it's legal to have sex.
In many states of the north, yes. I can say that categorically.
Wow.
18 years is not a national age of consent.
Is it 14 or 13? Because we know about 13-year-olds that get married to men in the north. Is that legal?
I know that under the Penal Code, under the Penal Code for the purpose of rape, it is 14 years. But I will not be surprised if there are one or two states that have even reduced it, which is quite tragic for me.
Very tragic.
But that is a different argument. Yeah. Sometimes when you speak about these issues, people try to make it about religion. It is not about religion. It is an abuse. It is a violation of the girl child.
Absolutely.
But in a place like Lagos and most of the southern states, the age of consent is clear. It is 18. And once the female child, once the girl is less than 18, the question of consent doesn't arise. We call it statutory rape. So it doesn't matter whether the child had consented or not, or whether the victim had consented or not. Once the age is less than the age of consent.
Anyway, is a rape suspect entitled to be defended by a lawyer at the expense of the state government?
Well, because the punishment is not death. Rape is not a capital offense, to the best of my knowledge. In any state in Nigeria, capital offense are offenses that attracts the punishment of death. It is in capital offenses that the law has evolved. The Supreme Court has recommended that the defendant, the person standing trial, should be afforded legal representation, or where the person is unable to secure legal representation, he should be entitled to some form of legal aid, either by the Legal Aid Council or some pro bono services by human rights groups. Irrespective of the offense, whether it is rape, whether it is terrorism, the constitutional right to fair trial and fair hearing, as enshrined in Section 36 of the Constitution, entitles every person to right of counsel of his choice. So every person has the right to representation. And where that person cannot afford, the state may want to offer representation. That does not take away the culpability of that person once the evidence is available.
Okay, you have situations where a lot of people don't come out to, we were discussing it earlier on, a lot of people don't come out to report because of the stigma and because of the shame. In fact, somebody that we were expecting today, unfortunately couldn't make it, said that when she went to the police station, first she was raped by armed robbers. When she went to the police station, the woman that was attending to her, the first question she asked her, what were you wearing? And that also still boils down to this condemnation and prejudice against women. Because a co-woman won't expect that that's a question that she will first ask.
Where was she raped?
What was she raped? She was raped. She went to her boyfriend's place, spent the night there. They came to the building, attacked everybody else, and she was one of the victims that was raped. So what I want to ask you, because I'm sure you've dealt with rape victims, is that what is it with this blame game, for one? Then secondly, what kind of after effects does the act of rape have on victims on a long-term basis?
The truth of the matter is that largely in the country, the Nigeria police, even though they have a family department or unit in basically all the police stations, they are seldom equipped. They barely have the technical knowledge, the professional expertise, and I say sometimes even the emotional intelligence to attend to cases like rape. So you find a situation of where victim shaming becomes a problem. That you approach the police station to lodge a complaint, and then they ask you very trivial questions, and sometimes even frivolous questions. Oh, like the one you cited, what did you wear? What were you doing there? All sort of questions that should not be really material. Shouldn't be really material. So that victim shaming is also a societal problem. How does society perceive rape?
Absolutely.
How does society perceive the victim? And what does this do? This does is that it makes the victim to suffer the effect of stigmatization. They are not able to summon the courage to go to the police. Because if you go to the police, they will ask you, what did you do there? Was that the first time?
What were you
They
wearing?
trivialize the matter. They trivialize the matter. Now, the victims must also have the courage to come out. They must have the courage to come out, to file a complaint. And then, thankfully, in a place like Lagos,
Yes.
the mechanisms have been put in place to ensure that these things are attended to in a more institutionalized way. We have the domestic and sexual offenses agency. There's a specialized agency in Lagos that attends to such cases. There's even a special court, a special court called the Domestic Violence and Sexual Offenses Court in Lagos. And statistics show that between, I think, July 2021 and September 2022, I know between a period of 2021 and 2022, Lagos has recorded over 4,800 plus cases that have been attended to by the agency.
How many of those cases, how many were the people convicted? The culprits convicted?
Many have been convicted. So what I am advocating to address the question you have asked is that the state governments should prioritize this matter. Specialized agencies should be set up like Lagos has done. And they should be accessible. For example, on Twitter, if you go on social media and you see cases being trending about rape, victims coming out to narrate what has happened to them, they don't wait for a petition to be filed. They don't wait for a victim to come up to them formally. They will even take steps to contact the victim and offer services, offer emotional support, medical support, and then take steps to ensure that the culprits are arrested. If we can replicate that in most of the states, it will go a long way to address the issue.
So let's look into the repercussions. There are countries today that actually castrate rapists. There are countries that actually humiliate them publicly, sentence them to death by hanging.
Maybe castration is not a bad idea.
It definitely is a bad idea, but there are countries today that are legally still doing it.
What is that possible?
Legal repercussions in Nigeria.
I think politicians are playing.
Castration is a bit extreme, isn't it?
For me, it is just a political grandstanding. That's without belittling the gravity of what we are discussing. I know that, I think Kaduna, and I'm not certain, but I know some states in the northern part of the country, they have passed laws. Some states in the country, they have passed laws that has now made castration part of the punishment. I'm not sure if that is appropriate. I'm not sure if that is acceptable.
Anyway.
The punishment is already severe. The punishment for rape in Nigeria is life imprisonment. So what we should focus on is to streamline the process, provide the technology for investigation, train those who are going to carry out the investigation, have a specialized court, and secure conviction.
I totally agree with you.
It's not making noise about who has been castrated since these laws were passed.
Well, I don't know anybody walking around without anything. Anyway, we are going on a break now, and we'll be right back with you, because this is a very deep topic that I think everyone should learn something or two from it. See you soon.
Welcome back to Perspectives on Arise News. Inibehe, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
We want to discuss false accusations for rape victims. If a woman falsely accuses a guy, what are some of the repercussions on that? If there's zero evidence, if you just cannot defend your case on rape, what are the legal repercussions there?
Of course, there are several remedies that are available under the law for persons who are falsely accused of rape. And the liability for the accuser is both civil and criminal. Under the law, if someone makes a false allegation of rape, the woman or girl can be sued for defamation in a civil case. And in a criminal dimension, the person can also be tried depending on the mode or the manner in which the false allegation was made. If someone goes on social media, for example, which is what is trendy now, to make a false allegation, or what is common, on social media to accuse someone falsely of rape, that person can be prosecuted for cyber stalking. That person can also be prosecuted for criminal defamation, because in some states, except Lagos, criminal defamation is still an offense. So we must take that seriously. And why that must be condemned is that it denigrates the
cases.
The
severity
acts.
that the actual victims have to face, what they have to deal with. It trivializes the issue. So when society is committed to prosecuting culprits, the society must also make it clear that false allegation cannot be tolerated. Because when you accuse someone falsely and it is found to be false, when the real victim comes up, doubts can be cast, on the story of the real victim. So that must not be tolerated.
Another thing I want to ask, does it matter if the rape victim does not resist her attacker or cannot shout because she's intimidated? And on the other spectrum, what about if the victim gets hold of something that she can use to defend herself, hits the attacker, and the person dies in the process?
Well,
what would happen to her?
In proving the offense of rape, because that is where your question is coming from.
Yeah.
There are several ingredients or elements that the prosecution have to prove. One, that the victim is a woman or a girl. Two, that the victim is not married to the defendant. And three, that the victim did not consent, or that the consent was procured by fraud, by deceit, misrepresentation as to the nature of the act, or by force. Now, these are some of the, and that there was penetration, of course, no matter how slight, that there was penetration. Now, where the offense has taken place, and then there is a debate, there's a controversy or a dispute as to whether rape actually took place or not. In court, circumstantial evidence, or it may be an evidential issue as to whether there was resistance or not. The law does not say that for rape to be proved, it has to be shown that the victim did not resist. I want to be very clear on that.
It has to be shown that the victim did not resist.
I'm saying that by law, to prove rape, the prosecution is not required to adduce evidence that there was no resistance. So whether there was resistance or not does not determine culpability. However, depending on the peculiar nature of the case, circumstances may arise where there is a dispute as to whether there was consent. That proof of resistance, oh, I shouted, oh, I screamed, I tried to resist, may go a long way to aid the case of the prosecution, of the case of the prosecution. So while you don't need to resist for one to be raped, or while one does not need to challenge, to fight off, because sometimes victims don't really have a choice.
Yes, especially if it's
how do you resist someone who is armed,
rape, for instance,
who is armed, who is heavier, or possibly someone that is responsible for your upkeep, for your education? That is another issue.
That's another
Sometimes the circumstance is such that there is no physical force per se, but the victim may be under some sort of duress, undue influence, because it's dependent on the culprit for survival. So that can also be a case of rape. So resistance is not necessary to prove rape, but resistance, evidence of resistance will aid the case of the prosecution.
Okay.
So there's a case of a very wealthy Nigerian who was abroad, committed drug rape crimes, and was deported back to Nigeria. And there were cases that he was actually doing the same thing here in Nigeria.
What do you mean drug rape?
When you drug the victims, you take them, date rape, you put substances in their drinks and whatnot. Came back to Nigeria and was perpetrating similar crimes here. And one of the victims was like, she didn't know what to do, traumatized, felt, subdued, suppressed, powerless. And like my co-host said, sometimes you go to the police officers and they're like, oh, why were you doing this? You know, maybe it's your fault, or they just send you back. What can such victims do? Where can they get help?
So to add to or supplement my answer based on what you have asked, and also related to the last question, the question of resistance. I'm coming to your question. Where a rape is taking place or is about to take place, the victim can actually resist, have the right of self-defense.
Yeah, but what if she's drug-induced, like she said?
Exactly.
And is not aware of what happened until when she woke up?
Which is why I said that consent, if you explain the issue that I had highlighted earlier, that the consent can be obtained by fraud, by misrepresentation, by deceit. Now,
is that still a consent?
No, it's not. It's not.
So
consent that is obtained by fraud is not consent.
It's consent, yeah.
It's not consent. So where someone has, put something in a drink to induce the person to sleep or get the person sedated, rape is committed. It is complete.
Without their knowledge.
It is complete.
Without their sanity.
So what I will encourage victims to do, have the boldness. I, as the lawyer, have had cause, because of my human rights practice, to interact with several victims of rape. Sadly, majority of them are undergraduates. And in some cases, I can say it authoritatively, victims who are undergraduates have told me that they were raped by their lecturers.
Wow.
But guess what? It is always a case of me crying more than the bereaved. The victims are very reluctant. And I don't blame them because, the society makes that to be so. The victims in most cases that I have been involved in are very hesitant to come forward.
Wow.
And even when you want to volunteer to fight for them, you see them backtrack, you see them timid, you see them unwilling to stand up. So there has to be a process, institutional and governmental, and even non-governmental, that will give support, some sort of sheltering, some sort of accommodation to victims, to enable them to fight, to enable them to have the courage. Because part of it is that you have to go to court to give evidence. If the suspect is arrested, the reason why most rape cases end at the police station, or part of the reason, is that you see these things being settled. I know cases, in fact, one just happened a few weeks ago, involving a minor.
Wow.
And I was so outraged, but the family collected money and moved away. And they said they don't want to pursue the matter. And I said, go and file a report with the police. So when I realized that they were not cooperative, and then if I now want to volunteer on my own to take up the matter, rape is not a case that you can ordinarily prove without the evidence of the prosecutrix. You need the evidence of the victim, because that is the person who was involved. So as a lawyer, you are constrained ethically from going all out when the victim is not willing to pursue the case. But as I said, in Lagos, there is a process that has made this much easier. So we need to replicate that in all the states, so that victims will know that when they come out, there will be allowance for witness protection. They can be accommodated temporarily. They may have to be relocated to live somewhere else until the case is determined.
Yes, I was just going to ask that when they are minors, when we're talking minors, talking about 8, 9 years, less than 10 years old, is it okay for them to actually come to court and face their accuser? Well, is there a way their identity can be protected?
Of course. As a matter of fact, under the Constitution, part of the exception to the constitutional right to publicity of trial under Section 36 is where a minor is giving evidence in a matter, or where a case involves a minor. The prosecution can apply to the court for the case to be heard in camera. Okay. Again, I know that in Lagos here, if you go to the Domestic Violence and Sexual Offences Court, most of their trials are done in camera. That is in close. The public is not allowed to view it. Okay. So that is possible where particularly a minor is involved. But where it is an adult, the court may be less inclined, to allow for secrecy of trial. But of course, an application can always be made if there are genuine grounds, if there are cogent facts. The court may be minded to grant it, especially where witness protection is an issue. Because sometimes witnesses don't want to come forward for fear of repercussion, for fear of being attacked. So we have to have a mechanism from the police. From the police is the major culprit. Why? Because of poor investigation. The technology, and it's not just the problem of the police, it's also the problem of lack of technology.
Okay.
Right? You will need the technology, you will need the science, you will need the resources to do proper investigation. If a hospital a doctor has to examine the victim,
Exactly.
right? To see whether there's a trace of semen in the vagina.
Yes.
Those things are expensive.
But let's
The
discuss-
victims may not be able to afford. So the states must make resources available. There has to be institutions, there has to be organizations that can facilitate that at no cost to the victim.
Should the body be set up for that? A body that will
governing
empower their investigation process. In other words, access to hospitals, easier access to hospitals, easier access to police records. And see, should something be created to make it easier for the police to investigate matters?
Of course, but it is something that states have to do. We don't need to look at Abuja for that. At state and local government level, these things can be done. There's even the sexual offences register, which is very commendable.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, naming and shaming. That if someone commits rape, the person is named, the name is entered and enrolled on the register.
There's a data.
Exactly, so that the public will know that this person has this history. Now, let the state governors take responsibility. Beyond the political razzmatazz of first ladies pretending to be fighting for the girl child, only when their husband is in office. They collect money saying they are doing NGO, they are doing charity. At the end of the day, nothing is said about it again. We don't need that kind of ad hoc, politicized arrangement for cases that affects the girl child and women. What we need is a strong institutional process where one can easily access services, access protection, and then get attention, get the culprit arrested, no matter how powerful.
Exactly.
No matter how powerful. Because sometimes, even when the victim is ready to pursue the case, when the culprit is politically exposed or is influential, has the resources to pull strings, you would begin to see institutions of state compromise. You will begin to see unwillingness to take the matter to court. The other part of it is that the courts must also, my constituency, the judiciary, also have a blame in the low rate of conviction, including the delay. I believe that we need specialized courts. Even if we don't have specialized courts like we have in Lagos, some judges should be designated. Chief judges of states can trust simply issuing practice direction. Appoint a judge to handle cases of this nature.
Pro bono?
No, judges, state judges, state high court judges.
Because sometimes the victims still can't afford lawyers.
No, it is the state that prosecutes. The Ministry of Justice is
pro
there.
bono. They will not charge the
No.
State is provided.
So that's if you have an expedited process where the trial can commence and be concluded within a short time, I kid you not, people will be more encouraged. Absolutely. But the delay in the justice system, which is due to multifaceted, reasons, that has also impacted on the slow specs of justice, the unwillingness of victims to come forward.
Let me get your opinion on preventative measures. So yes, we've discussed the causes and how we can get women to actually, go and seek help. But how can what's causing men to rape in such massive proportions, high statistics? What can we do to prevent this? From gender equality to sex education, what are some ways we can actually prevent it rather than treating the aftermath? It
is actually a very important question. I think it is a question for the society, not just for me. I get dumbfounded every time I go online and I read, man arrested for raping 2-year-old. What is this?
6-month-olds.
Where is the urge coming from?
But they're pedophiles. They're pedophiles.
This has nothing to do with the devil.
It's an illness.
Satan has never told anyone to commit rape. There is no family cause that can make a man to commit rape.
Most victims are these face me, I face you. People that live in face me, I face you houses.
That's true. There's a lot of that.
Because my maid has told me before that she lived in a face me, I face you house. And what the landlord used to do was that he will rape their children. And then when they accuse him, he gives them 6 months rent free or 1 year rent free.
Look at that.
So pedophiles are a menace in our society.
As a solution, parents have a role to play. Parents must watch their children more closely, interact with their girl child, so that they will have the ability to confide in them. Sometimes they don't have the courage to speak up, right? A lady came to my Facebook inbox a few days ago, and told me, oh, my father has been raping me from so and so years.
That's been another.
She's grown up. She never spoke about it until she became an adult. So mothers in particular must also pay attention to what their kids are doing.
And the moms that don't listen.
What their kids are doing.
But another thing I wanted to ask is that sometimes, what about when something is forcefully inserted into you? It's not a sexual act, but your body is violated. Like maybe they put a bottle. They put a bottle or use their hand.
It's still sexual, but it's
yes, it is. I'm just saying that
himself,
if it's not a physical sexual penetration.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
is it not the same as rape?
It depends on the part of the country and the applicable law. Because rape is a state offense. It is not a federal offense. So we cannot have one legal system or one legal regime. Now, under the Violence Against the Persons Prohibition Act, which is applicable in the Federal Capital Territory and some states that have domesticated it, including Anambra, Ebonyi,
I don't know why
Enugu
State define this matter.
Yeah. Enugu State has also domesticated it, or your state has also domesticated it, and Kaduna State has also domesticated it. Other than these states, and maybe a few others, rape in many states in Nigeria is still defined in a way that penetration has to be through the male organ.
Yeah, but the bottle entering your private part is penetration.
But under the Violence Against the Persons Act, rape can be committed not only through vaginal penetration, anal sex, oral sex, and even the use of instruments, objects.
Of course.
Dildo, pen, objects, any sort of object. Once there is penetration,
without consent,
it can amount to rape. Can amount to rape. So what we should advocate for is for a progressive legislative reform across the country so that we can have a more uniform and more adaptable legal regime regarding that matter. So that one will not say, oh, because, and we see these things, sometimes some very terrible, disgusting people, they could use objects, insert it into a woman's private part, and then they believe because it is not a sexual organ that they should not be responsible. It's not supposed to be so. So what I advocate is that this particular act, which is quite progressive, should be domesticated in all states. Should be domesticated, so that once this sort of heinous crime is committed, the victim can be charged for rape.
Okay, another quick question before we round up. What has been the average sentence for some of the rape cases that you've handled? Well,
the law says life imprisonment, but I know that depending on the state, there is some room for discretion. Some jurisdiction, the punishment should not be less than 15 years. But for most part of Nigeria, it is life imprisonment. And I have actually seen people serving life imprisonment for rape.
So there have been people who has...
When I was incarcerated, I spent 1 month in prison, so I can tell you. I saw culprits, those who are standing trial, those who have been convicted, serving imprisonment
for the very first offense, life imprisonment?
Yes. Once you are convicted.
Do you think that's optimal?
It is a serious offense.
What about rehabilitation?
Well, serve your sentence first, then you can start rehabilitation.
Yeah, but if they're doing a life sentence,
it's not in all cases that it is life imprisonment. As I said, it depends on the applicable law in the states. But I agree that maybe there is need for orientation, for rehabilitation, where the punishment is not life imprisonment.
There should also be need for even the victims too. Absolutely. To rehabilitate them back into society.
Absolutely. Because
they must carry a lot of baggage.
Why are people reluctant to come forward? Even when the victim comes forward, they don't have protection of the law, the economic leverage to be able to stand on their own, the psychological and emotional support.
But even some of the victims that come forward, there was a lady that came forward, told her mom, her mom said, shut it up, don't speak about it again.
And it was her father that raped her. They don't want her to be perceived as damaged goods.
Something like that. So there's always this stigmatization in the society.
That is why the earlier this matter, and I encourage victims, and that is what I've always told them, the earlier you go to the police, the better. Because if this rape is committed, 2023, and one waits till 2027, 2029 to make a case out of it, the chances of conviction gets slimmer.
Another quick question before we round up. Between when they report the case and when the person is convicted? How long does it normally take, on average?
There is no time frame. It depends on the circumstances.
So it can drag on for years?
Depending on the state, yes.
Because that's not very encouraging.
Which is why we need specialized courts.
Okay, so you feel that specialized
If there's a special court
to be created
yes,
specifically for this.
Exactly, like we have in Lagos. Those you have accelerated hearing.
So in those ones that you have in Lagos, how long does it take on average?
Again, you cannot say. It can be months. It can be months. It can be a year. It can be 2. You cannot say. It depends on the peculiarity of the case and what has transpired in court.
Okay. This is a bit... I thought we were going to leave here with a bit of encouragement, but this does sound like a very dire situation.
Very. I think
as in a lot needs to be done.
A lot has to be done.
It should just be prevented completely.
You can't prevent it because you always have perverts in society.
Unfair. Right.
But the people I feel most sorry for are the ones that don't have the financial wherewithal or financial powers
to defend
pursue
themselves.
this. At least the ones who can have chosen not to for societal judgment. Yeah, I feel more sorry for the ones who cannot, because they don't have the financial willpower to address it. And like you rightfully said, I think that hopefully each state will watch this program and decide that they need to set up a center specifically designed.
Beyond the drama that first ladies are putting up. Yes. Every first lady in Nigeria seems to talk about these things for the purpose of getting resources and allocation. But what results do they have to show for it? And when their husband has left office, or you know, what becomes of the NGO that they all set up to fight against cases such as rape? Let states institutionalize the process. Send bills to... How come that we are even having debate about the applicability of the Child Rights Act in some states? Some states have still not domesticated the Child Rights Act.
Wow.
So these are the issues, and we need to address them as a society, as a country. Because at the end of the day, it is also a question of how we want to be perceived in the civilized world, how we attend to cases such as this. And the society must also have the courage to confront this issue for the menace that it is, bring the culprits to justice, give succor to the victims, put a policy of deterrence so that when this is committed, others will know that when you do it, there's a price to pay, and a heavy price at that.
Thank you so much,
absolutely,
Mr. Effiong. Thank you for your very well said defense.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And we hope that states will look at or listen to what you just said.
Thank you.
First ladies, you guys have something to do. Okay? Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
As long as sexual harassment and assault continues to happen, and as long as people out there still think it is even slightly okay, then everyone is still in danger of this happening to them. We need to listen to survivors when they gather the unspeakable amount of courage it takes to speak up. As for victims, please don't be ashamed of your story. It will inspire others. You are not what happens to you. You are what you choose to become. And always remember that life is a learning curve. That's all we have time for today. You've been watching Perspectives here on Arise News with me, Ruth Osime.
And with me, Olatorera Majekodunmi-Oniru. Pure love and romance is such a beautiful thing that every human deserves to experience continuously. Rape is dark, evil, and unnecessary. In a world with endless love and opportunities, no form of violence or rape is acceptable to any gender, at any age, at any time. If you are racist, if you are a rapist, cease and desist. If you are a victim, find ways to speak up and report perpetrators. The key to a better world is humanity. Our world needs a much stronger dosage of healthy love, care, and compassion. Thank you for watching Perspectives. Thank you to our special guests for joining us today. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.